Previously on Interactive English. Which answer best completes the sentence? I would be 88 years old? All right. Whoa. That's not what we're talking about today. Today, I'm going to teach you all about time order words. Hey everyone, my name is Wes. This is Interactive English, which is all about helping you practice and improve your English. And if that is what you want to do, subscribe to our channel. We put out lessons every week that will help you take your English to the next level. In today's lesson, I want to talk to you about time order words, which are so important to help you improve your speaking fluency. And the reason I say this is because we use time order words when we're telling a story. We use them when we're giving a presentation. Because these are words and phrases that transition between different events and ideas, and they help people follow along with what another person is saying. So I've broken this lesson down into a few different categories, which you can see here. So first, we're going to talk about before. What are some different ways that you can discuss the things that happened before an event or before the story that you're getting ready to talk about? Then we'll discuss first. All right, what are some different ways that you can say first when you want to begin your story or begin your presentation? Then we'll look at different ways in which you can say next, how you transition from one idea to the next, as well as some different ways you can say sometimes. And then last, we're going to talk about last and some of the useful ways that you can tell people that your story is coming to an end, your presentation is coming to an end, and you want to tell them what happens last. Let's begin with before. And the very first word that I said in this lesson previously, that is the first time order word I want to talk to you about. And when you say previously, what you're talking about is the events that happened before. And you're kind of recapping the information from before so that people have a better idea of what you want to tell them right now. And when I think of the word previously, I think it's often used in TV shows when you're watching a series and they want to remind you about everything that happened before. You might hear that word previously. And I always remember the show Lost. I don't know if you've ever seen that show, but it would always begin.
Previously on Lost. Previously on Lost. Previously on Lost.
And then it would tell you about all the events that happened before so that you are ready to watch the show now. But you can also use this when you're talking about, maybe you're giving a presentation about research that you did. And you want to tell them some of the things you did before you started doing the research. So you might say, well, previously we identified the different methods we wanted to use for collecting the information. And you would tell people this so that they better understand the research that you want to present to them. Another common phrase is not long ago. And if you say not long ago, then you're talking about the recent past. And this may vary. It could mean a few hours. It could mean a few days. You really just have to put it in context when somebody says, well, not long ago, something happened. And that's going to help you understand what the person wants to tell you right now. Or if you're talking about something that happened a long time ago, then you're talking about very far in the past. Could be hundreds of years, thousands of years, a long time ago in a galaxy far, far away. And if that sounds familiar, and it should, it's because that's how Star Wars begins. The key word that I want you to focus on is ago, because this is also where I think learners make simple mistakes. I've often heard learners say things like, oh, 2 days before or 3 weeks before I did this thing. And I would have to remind them that in that case, they want to use ago, 2 days ago, 3 weeks ago, when you want to talk about the past and say that something happened before. Another great time order word is prior to. And when you use prior to, you actually want to use it with some event or something that took place. So for example, you could say, prior to the meeting, we had a conference call in which we discussed our yearly goals. So before the meeting, prior to the meeting, something happened. And again, you need to say the event that it is. Prior to the start of school, prior to the soccer match, something happened. Prior to filming this lesson, I was doing a live lesson. And that is a true story. We do live lessons on Saturdays. You guys should check those out if you haven't already. Now let's look at first, when you want to begin your presentation or begin the story that you are going to tell others, you can use the phrase in the beginning or at the beginning. Often these may be used interchangeably, but there is a slight difference. At the beginning would refer more to a specific time, whereas in the beginning would be talking about a time period in general. Let me give you a couple examples. So I could say, at the beginning of class, I was sitting in the front row. So that is talking about a very specific point in time at the beginning of class. This is where I was sitting. And then if I wanted to use in the beginning, I could say, in the beginning, class was so boring, so dull, but then it got super exciting and we were all so thrilled to be learning some new things. And I hope you guys are thrilled to be learning time order words. And if you are, let me know. Hit that like button. So in that example, I'm not talking about a specific point in class, just kind of referring to the beginning of class in general. So that is one difference between at the beginning and in the beginning. Then we have the phrase at the onset. And onset just means, the start of something. And you want to say at the onset when you want to say those things that happen first. Often, this is followed by the preposition of. At the onset of winter, the temperatures were really cold. At the onset of this lesson, I did a little parody off of Lost when I said previously on Interactive English. At the onset of the lesson. Okay, all right. Let's just move on to the next phrase or phrases, and that is from this point on, or you could say from that point on. And again, they are a bit different. So when you say from this point on, you are talking about right now. You are having a conversation with somebody and you're telling them, from this point on, I will be completely honest. Now, if you're talking about that, which is often referring to like a distance, something that's farther away, you can use that when talking about things either in the past or the future. So if we're talking about the past, I could say, from that point on, I've been completely honest. It happened at some indefinite point in the past, which is why I use the present perfect, but still, it happened in the past. From that point on, I've been completely honest. Or if I want to express this and say it in the future, maybe I'm talking about some point 2 days from now. And I'd say, okay, from that point on, I will be completely honest with you. From that point on, I'll be completely honest. Now let's look at some words and phrases in which we can say next, which is a very popular and common word when you want to transition from one idea to the next. Some very common words, which I think many of you already know, are words like after, then, or later. And I don't want to focus on those too much because I think it's a bit easy. You probably know how to use these when transitioning from one idea to the next. But we can add a word to make it a little more precise. For example, let's take after. And I could add the word right after. And when I say that something happens right after, then that gives you more information. You know that it happened immediately. Right after I got to work, my boss just started yelling at me. If I want to use another phrase that has the same meaning, you could say as soon as. And as soon as, again, it means that something happened immediately. As soon as I got to work, my boss started yelling at me. We can also add another word which has a similar meaning, and that is soon after. Now, the difference between right after and soon after would be just that time period. If somebody says right after, I think it's immediately. Soon after means, well, some general time period in the beginning, soon after. So right after I got to work, my boss started yelling at me, and then soon after he yelled at me, I just quit. I stopped. I went home. And then we can add a different word, which is shortly after, and that really just has the same meaning as soon after. You're talking about something that happens in that general time period of the beginning, shortly after. And I could continue this story and say, Shortly after I quit my job, I found another one. Hooray me. Then we have consequently. Now, this is a word that's used to say that something happened as a result of something else. So it is similar in that you're saying something happened next, but it's specific in that it's a result of another thing happening. So consequently, in that case, is very similar to saying therefore. For example, maybe I am going to play a football match outside and it starts raining. And I could say, well, it started raining and consequently we had to cancel the match. So canceling the match was a result of it raining. So I can use consequently to connect those two things and say that canceling the match happened next. It started raining, consequently we had to cancel the match. Now let's look at some different ways to say sometimes, which is a very common adverb of frequency because things don't always happen. Sometimes they don't never happen. I'm using it right now. You just want to say things happen sometimes. And I want to teach you 3 phrases that you can use, and you can use them interchangeably, and they just mean the same thing. So the first one is from time to time. From time to time, I like to eat pizza, which is true. From time to time, I like to eat pizza. Another great way of saying this is to use the word occasionally. Occasionally, I like to go for walks outside. Yeah, it's something I like to do. It relaxes me. I enjoy it. I like to do that occasionally. We can also use the phrase every now and then. Same meaning, sometimes. Every now and then, Every now and then, I make eggs for breakfast. Also a true story. I don't always do it. I just do it every now and then. Occasionally, I'll also have cereal, and from time to time, I'll eat oatmeal. All right, so those are some great examples, and now you know what I like to eat for breakfast. And finally, we come to last. When you want to say what's happening at the very end, you want to say what happens last. I already used one of the words that I wanted to tell you, and that is finally. So a good way when you start to end a presentation or you end a story, you can use either one of those, last or finally. Another way of saying that is just, at last. At last, something happens. And when you hear that phrase, at last, then again, that tells you, okay, we're at the end. Personally, I noticed that I'd like to use finally. When I'm going to wrap something up and bring it to an end, I just say finally most of the time. I don't really say last. I'm not really sure why, but I just prefer to use finally. Another way that you can say it, and I think it's a little more professional, you would probably hear it in presentations, or maybe if you're reading an essay, somebody might say in conclusion. In conclusion, and then they will give you the end of whatever it is. But like I said, I think it's something that's more common in a presentation. In a more formal setting, people might say in conclusion, and then tell you the end of their presentation. And I want to throw another one in there, and that is eventually. And you can use this to talk about things that happened at the end, often as a result of something else. Eventually, this thing happened. And when we use eventually, it makes me think of the end. There is some kind of closure. Eventually, this is what happened. For example, I could say that, well, my friend, they got really sick. They were in the hospital. They were there for some time, and they had to take some medication, but eventually they got better. And in that case, I think eventually is a word that you would hear more in just everyday conversation when somebody's talking about, the events in their life and things that happen. And when you want to bring it to an end and talk about what happened last, you could use eventually. Eventually, this thing happened. So prior to this lesson, I was reviewing my notes. And in the beginning, I was really trying to stress to you the importance of time order words, that they're so useful for your speaking fluency when you're giving a presentation, when you're telling a story. And consequently, I hope that you've learned some new words that you can then go out and use when you're having a conversation and trying to tell your own story. Because you will use these words from time to time. I promise you, every now and then, you're going to need these time order words and phrases. So in conclusion, I'm just trying to use these words again so that you can see how they're used, and just to show you that, yes, they are very important. They're very useful when you're having a conversation, or even in a more formal setting like work or school when you're giving a presentation. So let's practice a little bit. In the comments, I want you to tell me about your day. What did you do today? And I want you to use some of these time order words. I look forward to reading about your day and learning a little bit more about you, just as you guys have learned about me, such as the things I like to eat for breakfast. All right. Thank you guys so much for watching. I hope you learned something new, and I will see you next time.